Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Victoire. I am your host, Emir. Before I begin today's episode, I ask that you kindly subscribe to our channel, like and share these videos. It helps us spread them much further. Today's guest is a man who was partly responsible for inspiring me to create this channel. In the 1990s and also in the 1980s, in the WWF, the golden era of professional wrestling, he was the man with the money. He had so much money, in fact, that at one time he bought the WWF World Title belt. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a wonderful individual, a man of faith, character, and charisma. Today's guest, the $1 Million Man, Ted Dibiase.
Victoire. Victoire gives a special thanks to the EWF and Mr. Jesse Hernandez, as well as SoCal Wrestling TV. Find the app for free on Roku. Staying healthy can be a challenge, but not with Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market. Find the highest quality organic produce and supplements available in the USA. A tattoo is for life, so ensure that your tattoo artist is the very best in the country. Trusted Tattoo Company and Mobile Body Art Bus. Do you live in the San Diego area? Are you looking to become a professional wrestler? Look no further than Primal Pro Wrestling, 619-971-1445.
Palm Springs, California, Indian Wells, California, Rancho Mirage, California. They're all considered a destination hotspot, a second home haven. With an exquisite record of negotiating the finest deals for clients, Lowell Folsom III and Associates always deliver. Contact Lowell today at 760-391-2504.
Now, on with the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Victoire. I am your host, Emir, and joining me today is one of the WWE's Golden Era alumni. He's a man of faith. He's a man of charisma and integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an absolute pleasure to be here with the $1 Million Man, Ted Dibiase.
Thank you so much, Amir. I'm glad to be here with you.
Yeah, it's a true blessing for us, Ted. So, Ted, I want to start to educate those who are perhaps not familiar with your story. If you can take us back in time and just share with us, your early beginnings in pro wrestling and then some of the highlights throughout your career. Let's start there.
Well, pro wrestling has been a part of my entire life. My mother divorced my biological father when I was 2 and remarried when I was 5. And she married a man named Mike Dibiase. Dibiase's Italian. And and the other thing, a lot of people know that my father was a wrestler. What a lot of people don't know is that so was my mother.
Oh, she was?
That's how they met. Yeah. Her wrestling name was Helen Hild, Hild. And but what the other thing that I think that once they met, that they realized that they were both from Omaha, Nebraska, and realized that my daddy had a paper route, and he says, I'm almost sure that I probably delivered papers to my mother's house.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, grew up in the same neighborhood, never knew each other. Yeah. So anyways, when they first met, that was, I guess, the attraction.
Yeah.
But, and again, my dad was not only a professional wrestler, and the AAU National Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, I think it was 1946, amateur wrestling. When he got out of the Navy, he went to Nebraska and lettered there 4 years in wrestling, 4 in football. And then, I'm just not sure how he started in professional wrestling. But again, it was one of those things. It was kind of like I really don't know the story. I mean, I don't know what the thing was, but I mean, he was also very good and very well thought of in professional wrestling back in that era.
Hmm.
And so I had some pretty big shoes to fill. I always wanted to be him.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the things you learn as a kid growing up. I remember, uh, and we moved around a lot. Pro wrestling was very regional back then.
Yeah.
And so I grew up all over the country. I mean, I went to the first grade, Portland, Oregon, the second grade in Houston, Texas, third grade in Arizona, fourth and fifth grade in Omaha, Nebraska, sixth grade Amarillo, Texas,
Wow.
uh, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade back to Omaha.
Yeah.
And then the summer of '69 is when my dad had a heart attack and died.
Mhm.
And that took us back to this little town in southern Arizona called Wilcox, Arizona. I mean, even now, I think it only has like 4 or 5 traffic lights.
Wow. Very
I
small.
mean, it's down in the southeast corner of the state. It's 35 miles from a town called Benson, 80 miles from Tucson. And as the crow flies, it's probably uh, 70 miles from a very well-known Western town in Arizona called Tombstone.
Oh yeah. Tombstone.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so I ended up in this little school in with dreams of being a not just a wrestler, but a football player.
Yeah.
Signed a scholarship to play football in for Arizona, University of Arizona, and then watching TV one day, wrestling came on.
Hmm.
Now I hadn't seen any wrestling for 3 years. My dad passed away, and they didn't there weren't any wrestling shows. And then all of a sudden, I'm watching TV one day, and wrestling comes on. I recognized it as the tape coming out of Texas,
Hmm.
and they're coming to Tucson.
Yeah.
So I went to Tucson to see them. I mean, the very famous wrestling family, the Funk family, Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk, both NWA world champions. And their father and my father were very good friends. And so anyway, I went to see him, told Terry that I had signed a scholarship to play at Arizona. But in that, the way that all worked is like if you sign a letter of
Yeah.
intent, that's one thing.
Okay.
You could sign a letter of intent in every conference, but once you sign the national letter, you're committed. And
Okay.
I had not signed a national letter, so I took the recruiting trip to West Texas State, and West Texas State is just about 11 miles south of Amarillo.
Mhm.
And I tell everybody, like everybody thinks I went there to play college football. I said, well, kind of, but my real purpose in, passing up on the University of Arizona, go to a smaller school was, that I wanted to get into wrestling.
Yeah.
And this was my inroad, my connection back to the Funk family. And so at the end of my junior year in college,
Yeah.
I went to what is now or was then known as the Mid-South Wrestling Territory, which was all of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi,
Yeah.
big territory. The promoter, Cowboy Bill Watts,
Oh yeah.
and I started that summer. And I was going to wrestle for the summer. I had 1 year of college left.
Mhm.
By the end of the summer, things were going so well that I didn't go back to school. I didn't go back to college.
Wow.
Sitting here as a 70-year-old man now, I'm going, you dummy.
Yeah.
You had 1 year left. What was 1 year?
Yeah. Yeah.
But my love for wrestling so outweighed it, and the fact that I was doing so well.
Mhm.
Uh, anyway, by the grace of God, I didn't get hurt or disabled, and
Ted,
so
I got to ask you though. So what would you have done? Let's say you went back to college and you got your degree and all of that. Was there anything else that you may have considered doing, career-wise?
well, the only thing would have been I would have been a coach.
Okay.
I would have stayed, with a football coach or maybe like a a PE guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'd be a teacher of some kind.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and then the other question I was thinking there was you were drawn to pro wrestling. Was it the physicality? Because obviously back then the characters in that weren't quite like what they became in the 90s, etc. So was it more
Uh,
the physicality or was it the whole theatrics that drew you in?
I loved wrestling because I've been a part of it all my life.
Okay.
I watched my mother. I watched my father.
Yeah.
Of course, when my stepdad, Mike Dibiase, was my stepfather. My biological father, his name was Ted Wells, was a professional singer.
Okay.
You know, everybody talks about, no, Ted, you've got this great deep voice. I said, unfortunately, I couldn't carry a tune if it had handles on it. Mike DiBiase raised me.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, what was your question?
So it was just about what was drawing you in. You know, was it the physicality, the sport of it, or the theatrics?
Oh, just everything. I've watched my dad, like every week on TV, and very rarely, would he take us or take me? He said because he was always a heel,
Yeah.
and back then a lot of people took their pro wrestling very seriously,
Yeah.
and so that was just it. That's what my dad did, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Um, and when I and again, a large part of my decision to pass on the University of Arizona and go to a smaller college
Mm.
was not football. It was wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I knew that because of my father's relationship with the Funk family. I mean, Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk were kind of like family
Yeah.
to me.
Mhm.
And then it was, like I said, they came to Tucson. I went to see him. Terry arranged a recruiting trip, and the rest is history.
So when you're in Mid-South then, Ted, obviously you've got a lot of charisma. You know, you were very good on the mic and everything else. Was that utilized early on in your career, or were you more of a physical guy in Mid-South?
Well, it's the thing, and I tell people all the time. I've seen guys who love wrestling and they want to be wrestlers, and I watch them in the ring, and they do the moves right. They do everything right, but the intangible
Mhm.
is charisma. You can't teach it.
Right.
You either have it or you don't.
Yep. Yep.
And some people have more than other people, but if you don't have it, forget it. You're not gonna go anywhere. And it's kind of like I tell everybody, like one of my, junkyard dog, JYD, ended up being one of my best friends, and he was the best man at my wedding. And his real name was Sylvester Ritter. It's like, yeah, and great guy.
Yeah.
Not his ring skills weren't great.
Mhm.
They were good, and he had a great look.
Yeah.
What he needed was somebody to guide him in the ring. Okay. But you put the microphone in his hand, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
JYD had charisma coming out his ears. He
Yeah.
had so much charisma.
Yeah.
And again, I credit Cowboy Bill Watts as the first wrestling promoter in the United States to ever feature as his star wrestler
Mhm.
a black guy.
Really? I didn't know
Oh
that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Now there's other guys been, there've been other black wrestlers, but none was like the guy.
Mhm.
He was like the premier baby face,
Yeah.
good guy.
Yeah.
And as that was that, I said, okay, um, that spot is taken. So the only other spot that I want is I want the top heel spot.
Yeah.
And so, we had been friends for a long time. And I turned on him, and oh my gosh, well, when I turned on him, man,
The fans were,
an example of how, New Orleans, was a big wrestling town.
Hmm.
And I would say that 90% of the crowd was black.
Okay.
And so we go to New Orleans, and I even told, Grizzly Smith. Grizzly Smith was Jake Roberts' dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so he was Bill Watts like agent. He was the guy who came in and told everybody what they were doing that night, what the finishes were and everything. And he got the money from the front office and all that stuff. He
Okay.
was, he was Bill's guy.
Yeah.
And so I told Grizz, I said, look, I said, the first time I wrestled JYD in New Orleans, I'm not driving my car. I had a black on black Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I said, I'm not driving my car. And
Yeah.
he said, why?
Yeah.
I said, it'll be on blocks when I come out,
Yeah.
because they just took their wrestling so serious. Okay. So he says, okay, ride with me. I'm neutral. I said, okay. So I rode with Grizz.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, when you drive in, people see you drive in, whatever.
Mhm.
And so JYD we go out and we tear the house down, and it's kind of like he beats me from pillar to post, and then I load the glove and knock him out. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
So I go back, shower. Old Grizz comes in the dressing room, just got his hands on his hips, just looking at me, shaking his head. I said, "What's wrong, Grizz? Something wrong with the match?" He says, "No, the match was great." I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "They slit my tires." The fans, because I rode with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
They slid, and all four of his tires were flat.
Gosh.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's way back now.
Yeah. Did you guys have security that would travel with you to?
Well, no, there was no that traveled with us. No, there was policemen at the back door,
Yeah.
and like they would walk you to the ring and back and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. So fans were really back then, would you say because we know fans spend a lot of money on merchandise and stuff now. Was it the same back then? Were they all in? I mean, they were all into the stories, but were they purchasing merchandise back then? Was it still
Well,
the same?
really back then there wasn't that much merchandise.
Right.
The merchandise for wrestlers didn't really come along until Vince McMahon.
Right. Yeah.
And I can still remember the first time I walked into I don't know, a Walmart or whatever it was, and there was my action figure. Oh my gosh, I never envisioned that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they have they call them Funko Pops.
Yep. They've got
Okay, I've got one with a white suit, a black suit, and a green suit.
Honestly, I remember your action figure, Ted. The ones that were most memorable to me were the Hasbro action figures.
Yeah.
I remember I had the very first one with your black suit. Then there was I think there were two blacks, and then there was the green suit. I don't remember Bev in the white, but yeah, they were so. I mean, the marketing in the early '90s from WWF was phenomenal. I mean, you guys. In the UK, there was actually a store that was called the WWF store, and they had all the merchandise. It was between 90 and 93. The UK was just a swarm of WWF. Everything was merchandise. All the kids had T-shirts, curtains, bed sheets. I think you were actually on those too. I think you were in the curtains and the bed sheets. Yep. Yep. But obviously, going back to Mid-South, a big difference there. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask at this point your faith, because that's one of obviously the biggest things that, is the most celebrated thing is your faith in Jesus Christ. So at that time, had you had faith, like a foundation of faith?
I had a foundation of faith when I was very young. Again, my stepfather, Mike Dibiase's Italian, and like most Italians, my father was Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a lot of different schools because of all moving around, we did.
Yeah.
But wherever possible, I would be put in a Catholic school. And that was actually pretty good because every time I went to a Catholic school and then would go back to a public school, I was so far ahead of everybody. You know, it was kind of like the education in the Catholic school was really good anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I lost my train of thought.
So we were saying about your faith at this point.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you're in
So
wrestling.
yes, I went, I was like, so I became an altar boy,
Okay.
and I was like the award-winning altar boy. It's kind of like when it was the dead of winter and there was 4 feet of snow on the ground, and there was a 6 o'clock mass and an 8 o'clock mass. There wasn't anybody at that 6 o'clock mass except me and the priest, and he lived there.
All right.
He lived in the rectory, which was an apartment adjacent to the church.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that's how serious I was about my faith. And yeah, I grew up in Catholicism, and over the years, and I stayed pretty strong until I got out of high school.
Okay.
I mean, my faith carried me through my dad's death. I think I was 15 years old when he had a heart attack and died. I watched my mother sink into despair and alcoholism. Go back to finished high school in this little town, Wilcox, Arizona.
Yeah.
But I would go to the cemetery there late at night, park the car, shine the lights of the car on my father's grave, and I would pace back and forth. I would talk to him and I would talk to God. I would pray. And again, that was just, my prayers were just, God, I want to be the best that I can be. And help me, Lord, and give me the strength and da, 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 da. And so, I ended up graduating from Wilcox High School, with a scholarship to play Division I college football. And this is where I kind of get full of myself, and it's very slowly, the devil.
Yeah.
Pretty soon I'm not going to church anymore. I met my first wife in Amarillo, Texas. That was a marriage that should have never happened. I have one son from that marriage, my son Michael. And it was, and then I'm 3 years in West Texas State, and the summer between my junior and senior year, I go to Mid-South for Bill Watts, and I never go back to finish college. I still regret that. It's the only thing I ever did that I never followed through on. But as far as my faith, again, now I'm you are what you behold. Whatever you surround yourself with is what you become.
Yeah.
And so now I'm on the road with a bunch of guys who are, not hellraisers per se, but drink a little beer, do a little this, do a little that. It was all part of being on the road wrestling. And like I said, I had married the first time when I was just 20.
Very young. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Now, 20-year-old men are not mature enough to get married. No. Not in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%, Ted.
Yeah, I mean, the ladies, they mature faster than we do. Anyway,
yeah.
My first marriage didn't last very long, and we divorced, and I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and this was in 1981. And I met Melanie. I was young. She was a girl sitting by the pool with her friends. I wasn't just gonna go say hi there, anyway, it's a unique, I don't want to go through the whole story, but I meet Melanie. And Mel and we fall in love, and it's like I'm 26 at the time, and I remember we went out one night, we had dinner, and then I said, "You want to do something else?" She said, "Oh, there's this dance place." So we go to this dance place. She said, "You're probably going to be the oldest guy here," and I went, "How old are you?" She was 19.
Oh,
I was almost. I said,
right.
you're too mature to be 19."
Yeah.
Anyway, she was 19, and that's how our relationship started. And it just, we both did things. I mean, she'd only been to 1 year of college. And so towards the end of the summer, I left Georgia. I met her in Georgia. I was doing Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Right.
And I was going to go back to Bill Watts in Mid-South Wrestling and get an apartment in Baton Rouge. That's where everybody, either a couple places where guys would stay. And so she helps me move to Baton Rouge. I put her on a plane and sent her back to Atlanta, and I'm gonna try to be chivalrous. Then that didn't last very long. I called her and I said, "I love you. I want you here." She says, "I'm coming." And so she packed her bag, and she drove a little MG midget, and she drove all the way from Atlanta to Baton Rouge, and that was it. We started off living together,
Mhm.
and then uh, the guy who ran the gym where I worked out, his name was Foxy Denham. The gym's name was Foxy, and I met Foxy there, and so we wrestled in Baton Rouge on Tuesday nights. Tuesday nights, and when I would go to wrestle, Melanie would go to a Bible study at Foxy's house.
Interesting.
So Foxy calls me in his office one day at the gym, and he says, "Hey, Ted," he says, "can I ask you a personal question?" I said, "Sure." I said, "Are you in love with Melanie?" I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "So why aren't you married?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I made a mistake the first time. I don't want to make another mistake. I don't, I certainly don't want her to make a mistake." And he listened. He was very patient. He says, "That's all good. Sounds like you've learned some things. But here's the bottom line. You're living in sin." What? Bang. uh,
Yeah.
I couldn't say anything. He was right.
Yeah.
And so I said, "The first thing you do is repent." And he said, "Then you get married." And so on New Year's Eve, 1981, in Foxy's house, Melanie and I got married.
That's
So
very nice.
yes, it's hard to forget your anniversary when it's New Year's Eve,
Yeah. No, that's
and so that's when Mel and I got married, and uh, I stayed in that territory for a while. Then I went back to Atlanta for a little while, and when I went back to Atlanta, she and I actually, her parents, her dad had retired. They moved to Mississippi,
okay.
and we go to Atlanta, and we lived in the house that she grew up in.
Oh, that's that's really neat.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so we just paid the mortgage on it, and then
Yeah.
as we were, instead of paying rent, I paid the mortgage payment on the house, and it was a better deal. And
Yeah.
so anyway, and then I came when we left Atlanta. Then we came back here. Trying to think what year that was.
And
Uh,
Ted, at that time, I will ask because it's one thing I think the viewers would find interesting. What character were you playing at that time in Mid South and Championship Wrestling? What was your persona?
my persona at that time was I was a good guy.
Okay.
I was a one thing. The wrestling term is baby face. I was a baby face,
Yeah.
and and so I didn't turn bad guy for a while, and um, I'm trying, I can't remember just when we did it, but one of the guys that became a very big name was Junkyard Dog, and his real name was Sylvester Ritter, and he was from the Carolinas. and had, a great big body, great guy, great look. And he was really good on the microphone.
Yeah.
JYD had a lot of charisma.
Yeah.
You can't teach charisma. You either got it or you don't.
Right.
And he had it for sure. And so he and I were good buddies. I mean, we'd ride together all the time. People saw us together all the time. And so, and Bill Watts, to his credit, is the first time a wrestling promoter featured as his star babyface a black guy.
Yeah.
And that was JYD.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, okay, I'm going to be your bad guy. And so I turned heel, and I turned heel on JYD. And oh my gosh, man, you talk about people mad. I mean, everybody knew we were friends, saw us together all the time. So I turned heel on him, and we made a lot of money together. But oh my gosh, I mean, I remember one night I told the guy's name was Grizzly Smith. Grizzly was Jake Roberts' daddy.
Yeah.
But he was like Bill Watts, who ran the territory. It was the guy. He came in and told all the guys, here's what you're doing tonight, and if you need a draw, you can get a little money. Anyway, so I mean, I remember telling Grizz, I said, the first time I wrestled JYD in New Orleans, I am not driving my car. I had a Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am. I say, I'm not driving my car back to New Orleans. And he said, why? I said, because it'll be on blocks when I come out.
Yeah.
He said, okay, ride with me. I'm neutral. Okay. I said, okay. So I rode with Grizz, and JYD and I go out, he beats me from pillar to post, and then I find a way to cheat and win again, which means we come back and do it again next week. So I go back in, I shower and everything. I come out, and old Grizz comes walking in the dressing room, got his hands on his hips, looking at me, just shaking his head. I said, what's wrong? He said, and he just shaking his head. I said, was something wrong with the match? He said, no, the match was great. I said, what's wrong? He said, they slit my tires.
The best thing.
I just because I rode with him.
Yeah. And
I mean, they all four of his tires. I mean, we were there.
Yeah.
After night trying to get home.
And that was one of the things with the business back then. It was so risky, with the fans. Like you said, they were passionate, and they believed 100% that what was going on was, factual. I got to ask you though, that time, Ted, so you're making waves. So was that what led you to getting attention from Vince McMahon? Was it that time when you were feuding with JYD, or was that a little bit later?
No, that came a lot later.
Yeah.
Because I wanted, so it's kind of like the territories, when it was all territories, guys moved around a lot. If you go some way, and you're there long enough, then they need some fresh material.
Right.
And so you would leave, and then if I left for a year or two, I could come back and I'm brand new again.
Okay.
So Melanie and I went back to Atlanta. I went back, got on the Atlanta TV, because my name was, Terry Funk said, go back to Atlanta, get on that TV, because it was the only wrestling show that was national. Ted Turner's cable network.
Yeah.
And he says, because your name's in the hat for maybe the next NWA world champion. Yeah. And so I went back to Atlanta, and things didn't work out that way, which was no really big deal. What did work out, that I ended up having a great deal in Japan. I was going back and forth to Japan.
Okay.
When we went back to Atlanta, Melanie and I lived in the house she grew up in. Her parents moved to Mississippi, right. Where her mother's from. Yeah. And so we go back to Atlanta, and we lived in their house, and instead of paying rent, I just paid the mortgage on the house, and it was great. And eventually I go back to work for Bill. I kept going back to Bill Watts because he was really good. His understanding of the psychology of what we do was probably the best, and the programs I was in there were great. So, but I had always been a good guy.
Yeah.
So now I turned bad guy, and JYD. Oh my gosh! I mean, 90% of the crowd in New Orleans is black. You know, it's like that's why I saw cigarettes. I'm not driving my car.
Yeah.
It'll be on blocks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he came in, like I said, you know, with his hands on his hips, shaking his head. They slid my tires, all of his tires. They slid all of his tires, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But
Now,
I mean,
at,
bottom
at,
line, we
at
had
this,
to think
yeah, thank God for that. At this time, Ted, financially, was everything good? I mean, in terms of that was your source of income, or were you working
oh
elsewhere?
yeah, I mean, I was a wrestler every day.
Yeah.
You
So,
know, I mean, when I left college, I never did anything else but
okay.
wrestle.
Okay. And
I
how many
was,
days?
I was either a wrestler or I was, you know, I did after I was a wrestler, I went, you know, like I would be like a ringside manager. I did that for a while, and then
How
uh,
many days a week were you working at that time?
every day.
Every day. Wow. Wow.
We didn't have days off.
Wow.
We might have, well, you know what? What's really crazy is, I mean, we had Christmas off, and we might have Thanksgiving off. But when the promoters found out that people like to, you know, like eat their Christmas meal and then go out and do something,
Yeah.
those days became the biggest money days. So we didn't even get those off.
Nice.
Crazy.
And how about your wife? How about Melanie? How was she supportive of it? Did she want more time with you?
Melanie was great. I mean, you know, because I told her, man, I said, when in Atlanta, Atlanta's the only territory where I would wrestle, and each night I came back to my apartment, and I would go the next day. You know, but in Mid South there were times like, I mean, I would wrestle in we lived in Baton Rouge, so I would go to New Orleans and come back to Baton Rouge. Tuesday night I was in Baton Rouge, but Wednesday I'd have to drive to Shreveport, then Shreveport over to Jackson, Mississippi. Anyway,
Okay.
so there was more time away.
And what about Japan, Ted? What about Japan? Did she travel with you or?
No, no. And it's kind of like and those were some hard times, because she would even tell you, it's like she went back to, I mean, she's living in the house she grew up in, you know, and she still has friends there, but she's married now.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's married now, and the other thing is, we got married on New Year's Eve, and I think it was like in March we found out that she was pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so before our before our first anniversary, we're also parents. uh, uh, anyway.
Yeah. So that time. So now you're working for Bill Watts. You went back there. So you were there for how long? Because you got signed to WWE with Vince in what, 86, 87, somewhere around
87.
there?
Yeah.
So you were obviously one of the main draws, those attractions in Bill Watts in Atlanta, and then of course you go to Japan. What was it like for you working in Japan though? Because obviously it must have been a bit of a culture shock to say the least.
Well, yeah, but I had gone to Japan at least once a year
Okay.
since the first year I started wrestling.
Right.
And yes, it's different. You know, it's kind of like you know, the hollering and the screaming. You know, I mean, over in Japan, they were very polite, and they'd see some big bump, and everybody would just go, "Ooh!" It was like, it was really different. But I made good money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Made good money, and so yeah, and you know what, you know, I look back at that, and what Melanie endured was, I mean, it's kind of like we finally we moved into a new apartment complex, and she met this girl whose husband was a trainer at the gym, at Foxy's gym. And so Melanie and this gal, they became and to this day, they are the best of friends. And at least she had somebody that was there, somebody that could be her friend, and she's not alone all the time.
Right. Right.
And again, so like I said, then I went back to Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
and that stay was shorter. And then when I went back to work for Bill, uh, in what year it was, I can't remember. I just remember going back, leaving Atlanta because Mel was not. Her parents had moved to Mississippi. Okay, so we eventually did the same thing when I came back from Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead of moving to Baton Rouge, I moved to Mississippi so she could be near her parents and my children near their grandparents.
Yeah, it was very nice. Very good. So at this point then, Ted, so we come into the time when you meet with Vince. So when Vince wants to bring you up. So how did that come about? How did that meeting come about?
Well, I can still remember. I had wrestled in New York, uh, and I'd been there. But the first time I was there, I was just a couple years into the business, And matter of fact, my last match, the first time I went to New York, was in Madison Square Garden against this new guy named Hulk Hogan.
Really? What?
I had Hulk Hogan's first match in Madison Square Garden.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was very grateful because I made him look like a king. And I remember he told me, he says, man, he said, I owe you one. And so years later, in '87, when I did go back, the first time I saw him, he walked up, shook my hand. He says, it's payback time.
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, it certainly was for that time. Because you had, like I said, the $1 Million Man character. I mean, the fact that we're still talking about it 40 years
oh my
later.
gosh. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like, I remember in one of the meetings, Vince said, listen, I have an idea. So many things in wrestling have been done and redone, but I've got an idea and it's fresh, it's new, it's different. He says, I can't tell you what it is unless you agree to sign on and come with me. He says, because I don't want to give away a good idea. You know what I'm saying? He says, if this is going to be done, it's going to be done here.
Right.
And so, of course, I went and talked to my wife, and then I remember calling Terry Funk, and I remember Terry said, Teddy, if Vince McMahon has an idea and he thinks it's tailor made for you, pack your bag, don't look back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, well, I thought that's what you'd say. And so Vince flew my wife and I back up to New York, and so he goes, Teddy says, the one thing everybody hates is someone who, by virtue of their wealth, bullies people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They bullies people with their wealth. They're always looking down their nose at everybody. And I started laughing. I go, I can't stand guys like that myself. And he says, that's basically the essence of this character. And he says, we are, to the best of our ability, going to try to make the public believe you're really that guy. How you doing that? We're flying you everywhere first class, limousine service, airport, hotel, Coliseum, hotel, airport. Everywhere the public sees you, they're going to see pictures, because not everybody got that treatment back then. Like maybe the Hulkster and of course Andre the Giant. Of course Andre couldn't fit in anything but a limousine.
Right.
And first class airfare.
Yeah.
The whole deal. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And he said, I believe it could be one of the hottest deals we've ever had.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so that's when they came up with all those ideas. I mean, like the first few things, vignettes, they called them.
Yeah.
There was one vignette where I want the best hotel in the hotel, and it's the honeymoon suite. Well, there's a honeymoon couple in there. Kick them out. One, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, I paid the guy, and
Yeah.
they kick them out. I kick out the honeymoon couple. You know, I go to the pool. I want privacy.
Yeah.
Get all these kids out of the pool. You know, we did all that schmuck, stuff.
Yeah.
And we did all that before the people ever see it.
Yeah.
Those vignettes played each week before I ever walked through the curtain, went to the ring.
Yeah. No, it really helps cement you as this heel character. And that,
Yeah.
I mean, you can say it was ahead of its time. It really was. When I think about those vignettes, I remember the one that you did at the pool, and the one where you went into, I think it was a restaurant, and there's a line of people, and you're like, nah, I'm going, I'm going to pay. And you skip the line, this plush restaurant somewhere. They were fantastic. I've got to ask, did you have as much fun with shooting those as you did in the ring and out there in front of the crowds? Was it equally as fun for you?
Well, it's like doing those vignettes was more like acting, and it was I liked it. No, obviously I enjoyed doing it because it was something that was going to establish me. But I liked in ring better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
In ring better.
You definitely excelled at both. So you get the $1 Million Man character, and then you do your debut. And now, correct me if I'm wrong. They accelerated you really, really fast, because I remember you bought the world title. I think it was in '88, was it not? 88, in 1988.
Yeah, you know I had WrestleMania 3 had just happened.
Okay.
I mean, they set an indoor world attendance record.
Yeah.
93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, if I'm going to stay relative in wrestling, I've got to go work for Vince McMahon. Little did I know that the next WrestleMania, I would be the headliner.
Yeah. Yeah. You were.
And, it wasn't in that great big building. I mean, it was in the same building where I think Donald Trump owns the building. They do the Miss America pageant there. It's in Atlantic City.
Yeah, the Trump Plaza.
Yeah, but it's like it's not that big. I mean, it's not. And by the way, I also met Trump.
Okay. Yeah.
And Vince introduced me to him, and they became friends. They even had much later. They actually had a wrestling match.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe it's one of the WrestleManias, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got to meet I said, I am the imitation version of you.
Well, you did a fantastic job. Like I said, at that time, you were in there with Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan. I think, in fact, yeah, again, correct me if I'm wrong, you were pretty much exclusively really in the main event and all those pay-per-views through 88, 80 at Survivor Series, I think
If
89.
not close to it. I mean, the last match in the WrestleMania 4 became a tournament to declare a new champion. And it ended up being Randy Savage. And Randy, of course, that's when I actually turned Randy babyface.
Yeah.
Up until that time, he was a heel.
Yeah.
And when he beats me, he was a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah.
And you were working with Virgil at the time, so
Yeah.
God rest his soul. How was the relationship like between you and Virgil personally when you were working together?
Oh, he was good. He was a good guy. Fairly simple. I mean, it's kind of like very good guy. Never any trouble. They're always on time, always there when you needed him. He just wasn't real bright. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice way to put it, but a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, again, somebody who stayed a friend.
Yeah, no, you had a good time. And thinking about the $1 million belt, just again to educate people that aren't familiar, you had the $1 million belt. It was a belt that you made, you financed,
Oh,
and
yeah. The
and
whole storyline was, so because I failed to win the world title at WrestleMania 4, I thumbed my nose at it. I said, I don't need your stinking belt. I'll create my own. But the $1 million belt. Now, here's the deal on the $1 million belt. The $1 million belt, its actual worth was about 40 grand. All the stones in the face of that belt were cubic zirconium. I mean, somebody said they were almost diamonds. So there's like, I can't remember how many stones were actually in it, but they said basically each one of them was probably $50.
yeah,
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
that adds up pretty quick. Anyway, the estimated value is 40 grand. When anytime I went to, like if we went to Canada or went overseas, I had to have a declaration page for customs to look at.
yeah, yeah. No, that belt was good. I mean, it was well, like I say, it was iconic even on your action figure. I remember the
Yeah.
little $1 million belt came with it. So maybe tell us some of the highlights between 87, because obviously you changed things changed when you separated from Virgil, and then you were managed by Sensational Sherry. So but during that time period when you first came into what around about 91, what were some of the highlights there for you during that time?
You know what, brother? Things like that are hard for me to remember
Yeah.
because we were just going at such a fast pace. I mean, like, uh, it's kind of like I can remember uh, we would go out for 3 straight weeks, 21 days, 21 cities, go home for a week and then do it again. Then they changed it to 10 days off, 3 days, 10 days on, 3 days off, 4 days on, 3 days off. So, but anyway, you look at it, you still want to get 6 days off a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just such a grind. So there's a lot of things that I can't remember. I think that I think WrestleMania 6, I think was the one that was I think it was in Canada.
Yeah, the Sky Dome against Jake.
Sky Dome. Me and Jake wrestled at the Sky Dome. Had a great match with Jake.
Yeah.
That was one of my, a lot of people favorite matches. And it's hard to pick one when you wrestle so often, but that was one of them.
Yeah, that was when I think Mary Tyler Moore was there, and then he
Yeah.
paid
Yeah.
for some of the money. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was very good. Again, that was a time where I think, looking at it from an outside perspective, the product was so manicured at that time. It rarely transmitted on the screen that you guys were, working so hard because you looked fresh every time you came on. The product was seamless. The storylines were perfect. So, but how were you dealing with it, like mentally, physically? Were you always tired? Were you tolerance for
Well,
pain
yeah,
at night?
that's that. Well, and that's the deal. It's kind of like, uh, that's when you start, I mean, I never had any addictions. Like guys would get addicted to, I don't know, some guys smoked pot, and some guys, would do cocaine or whatever. I never got much into drugs. Uh, all pot ever did was make me go to sleep or get hungry. So I never, I just did, uh, my weakness, I guess, was women.
Hmm.
And that's a big part of my story is that I had gotten so caught up in what I was doing and in obviously grateful that I had this spot you know, and the old $1 million man thing, you know, and even that, you know, getting treatment that not everybody got. But uh, the where the rubber met the road was, it was 1992, I believe, and we had gone to Great Britain.
Okay.
And I called home, and Melanie had discovered something. I mean, like I had made a phone call with some girl, you know, that used to be. You could look at your phone listings, and all the numbers were there that she did. Anyway, uh, so I call from London, and I'm like, she just lit lights into me. She should have. And I said, I don't want to talk about this on the phone. I'll be on the next plane home. She said, no, you won't, because you don't live here anymore. That's when I called a guy who he to this day is a very close friend. His name is Pastor Hal Santos. Hal and his wife became really good friends of Mel and I. And you know, I can't even tell. Well, when I first met him, I met him in the gym, the same gym
Oh yeah,
in Baton Rouge, you know, Foxy's gym. That's where I met him, and that started a friendship. Then he just stayed in touch with me, and in my darkest hour, that's who I call. So he made arrangements for, and now by this time he was in St. Louis. He was pastoring the church and right across the river on the Illinois side of St. Louis. And so he made arrangements for Melanie to fly in, and he says, and I was in Europe, and I went to Vince. I said, I got to go, and he understood. And so, you know, back the longest 30-minute ride of my life was from the airport to Al's house to face my wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just knew that I had blown the greatest thing that ever happened to me. You know, and when you're in the middle, when you're in the midst of sin, you make excuses for it.
Yeah.
And I was making excuses for it, you know. I was sure, I was dead sure that she was going to leave me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I deserved. That's what I deserved. You know, guys, it had become, I had become like the rest of the guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, next town, next show, next party, next girl. And when we went to visit Al, he had to take his kids to this thing up in Chicago called the Ascension Convention, and it was like 1,500 teenagers from all over the state of Illinois would come to this thing. And so he was taking his youth up to Chicago from St. Louis. Yeah. And so he says, you guys are coming with us. So I'll go anywhere you want. And the speaker of that day, that first day, was a guy named Reggie Dabbs. And Reggie's really good. And he got to that place where he says, if you know what you need, and you know it's Jesus, then I challenge you to get out of your chair and come forward right now. So with the $1 Million Man, this guy who had been driven by his pride and his ego, all this fame, their jets, limousines, action figures. But I get up in front of 1,500 teenagers, all of whom which knew me. Yeah. Highlighted blonde hair there and everything. The answer is yes. The answer is that I was so desperate for God, I beat every kid in that building to the front. I literally ran down. And I ran down and I went to my knees. I put my face in the carpet and cried like a baby. Didn't care. I didn't care what anybody thought, because all that mattered in that moment is that I get right with God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can even remember in that conversation, with God, I said, I know I'm going to lose her, but that's what I deserve. And I said, I know you'll help me. And so I was giving God my word that I would take care of her and my children, in spite of whatever happened.
Yeah.
But the biggest, shock of all was my wife's response. Because I confessed everything, and I, she said, I serve a God of restoration, not divorce. She goes, I'm not going to promise you anything. She goes, quite frankly, I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this, but I serve a God of restoration, not divorce. And I said, if you'll give me this chance, I'll become the man you thought you married. I will become the spiritual leader in my home. And God willing, I'll regain your trust and respect. And that was in March of '92.
Okay.
And the rest is history, man. I mean, to the point where, I was, when I stopped physically wrestling, which was, I think, in '94.
Yeah.
I think that's when I physically stopped. I'm not sure. Anyway, then I became a manager and whatever. So, but I just never thought that my wife, Melanie's response to me was the greatest example of Christ-like love and forgiveness
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that I've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
And and she told me, she goes, I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this. She goes, I might last a week or two or whatever. She goes, I just don't know, but I'm not going to promise you anything. Well, we've been married 43 years now, and we are stronger. We are, I guess, more in love uh, than we've ever been.
It's amazing.
God doesn't just fix things; He makes them better than they were.
Yeah.
And that's my story, and that's the story. That's the other thing. I ended up, old Pastor Al. I remember he called me one day. He says, I think you're ready, Ted. I said, ready for what? He said, to tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of run that by me, and I went, you know what? Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. If that'll lead somebody to Jesus, let's do it.
Well, I gotta say, Ted, and for all our viewers out there, you were part, obviously, the Holy Spirit, Christ. I'm a born again believer since 2004. So for me, your testimony was one of the things that actually encouraged and inspired me to create this whole interview series that I'm doing now. Uh,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
I've always loved pro wrestling. But when I started hearing more and more guys were coming to Christ, and I could see how God is utilizing these larger than life characters to lead people now towards Christ. I mean, it's incredible, the numbers, but yours was one of the first testimonies I heard. And I said, Lord, I want to do something where I can combine what I know, what I loved as a kid, and then now help lead people to Christ. And you, sir, were one of the guys, the main guy that helped me, encourage me to start this. So it's a true blessing for me. And victoire, Ted, means victory in French. So read between the lines why I called it Victoire, this series. So the victory is in Christ. And one of the things that I think is tremendous about you, Ted, is your vocalization of your faith. And I
Yeah.
think it's so rewarding, and it's great. People my age, grow up watching you as the $1 Million Man. The reach that you have is absolutely, it's vast, it's international. And so
Well, and
yeah,
again, and to what you're saying, I never envisioned in my wildest dream, but I realized, I said, I believe that God allowed me to have this run with fame, without however little or how big it is, because he knew one day that I would take that fame and instead of using it to gratify myself, I would use it to lead people to him.
amen. Amen.
And that's what I'm still doing.
Yeah. You're still doing it and you're still inspiring. And and I did want to ask you about that, pearls of wisdom for people that, maybe considering getting into the professional wrestling industry. What would you say to them? I mean, obviously, if they are Christians as well, because I think, Ted, I want to ask you something, because for me, when I became born again, I was, big into wrestling. I was actually training to be a wrestler in '02. I was at UPW in El Segundo in Southern California with Rick Bassman, and I was training. But I became born again, and all of a sudden, it's like I can't be involved in it because it's promoting violence or whatever it was. That was my initial thought. So I course corrected. I went in another direction. Subsequently, I think God was working on me because I realized now, definitely, like you said, God allows these things, allows people to be in certain industries because of what they can do for expanding the kingdom of God. So, what would you say to someone who is a Christian, who loves wrestling, but maybe they're conflicted?
Well, I would say, well, number one, God says, God says he has a plan
Mm.
for everybody. So, everybody that's ever born, if they search, and say, he said, search for me. And when you search for me with all your heart, you'll find me. When you'll find your plan. I said, that's what I tell people. I said, I believe God allowed me to have this measure of fame because he knew one day that he'd get my attention and that I would turn it around. And instead of using it to glorify myself, I would use it to glorify him. And I believe that's still possible. I don't watch enough wrestling anymore, quite frankly, because, it's like, the last few times I watched, it's kind of like the girls seem to be having more realistic matches than the guys. It looks like it's like when we got in the ring, we would tell a story, even if it was a short story.
Yeah.
Now it's just bumping. It's just guys flying all over the ring. Nothing makes any sense.
Mhm.
But I mean, but can you be a Christian and be a wrestler? Sure. I mean, I did it. I mean, I eventually did it. I mean, obviously, yeah, there's a lot of things out there, like that can, I mean, again, I wasn't, my crutch wasn't pot or booze or anything like that. Unfortunately, mine was lust.
Mhm. Yeah.
But you know, but when I really came to Jesus, when I ran down that aisle in front of all those kids, it basically said, God, I don't care. All I want is you.
Yeah.
Changed everything. And so, yeah, I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Exactly. If the $1 million man can do it, anybody can do it. And
Yeah.
there was a change in you. I remember that in '92. Um, I remember the SummerSlam '92. I was there, Wembley Stadium.
Yeah.
And you had I don't know if that was the first time I saw you wearing the white trunks because you switched from the black to the white. Now, was that, I must ask, was that because of your being born again at that time? Did you think about it, or was it just
Well, I didn't. No, I really didn't think about it because I was still the $1 million man.
Yeah.
But and what's funny about that is, I only wore that outfit a couple of times because I said, you know, bad guys don't look good in white. So
Yeah.
I didn't wear it too much after that, but anyway.
Yeah. But then of course, you went on, you became a color commentator alongside Vince. I think the first time I heard you was at Royal Rumble 94, where you
Yeah,
color commentated, and you did a fantastic job with that. Your mic skills are, unmatched. You really knew how to work the mic. And then of course you came back with the $1 Million Corporation in 95, which was, I thought that was very, very interesting. I
yeah,
really enjoyed that when you brought in Sid and Tatanka and everything else. That was great. And then, of course, you went to WCW, where that was pretty much, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where you finished up with the NWO.
yeah. That's correct. And hindsight's 2020. Sometimes I think maybe I should have just stayed with Vince. Vince had done so much for me, but I mean, uh, but in business, it comes down to the money.
Mhm. Yeah.
And even Vince, and I did eventually go back to work for Vince after that, but I was behind the scenes. They wanted me to be a part of the creative team, and think up all these ideas and stuff. And I tried to tell them, I said, look, that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm not, you tell me what the idea is. My gift is to make it happen out there. It's not to come up with the ideas, so that wasn't my gift. So anyway,
Yeah. But
but
yeah, but nonetheless, I mean, it truly was a stellar. It's still. I don't say was. It is, because we can still relive it today. People can find all the old videos and pay-per-views, and they can relive the entire story with the $1 Million Man. But Ted, I must ask you, because I do ask all guests that come on the show. In your opinion, what is the meaning of this life?
this life,
This life. What is the meaning of life?
well, the meaning of life, especially if you come to know God, is to seek out His will. It's kind of like one of the scariest scriptures for me. It's like when Jesus said, "Just because you say to me, Lord, Lord, doesn't mean you will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father in heaven." Many will come in that day and say, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? In your name, we drove out demons. We did miracles. And Jesus said, and I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Depart from me. Wow.
Right.
When that hit me, the fact that you could go and do miracles and touch people in such a way. And here's the difference though. What Jesus is saying, you didn't do it to bring recognition to me. You did it to bring recognition to yourself.
Mhm.
That's that's the difference. And it's like, so it's I mean, that's why I don't mind getting down in the dirt and telling the nitty grittiest. Yeah, I was the worst. I went from being a God fearing Christian to just you know somebody out to please myself.
Yeah.
I was filling the void, on the road, and the different people fill it different ways. And mine happened to be women, and that's probably one of the worst ways. But again, God knows the beginning. I mean, He knows the end from the beginning. Um, the fact that my wife heard my confession, you know, and I remember I think she used to think, well, all those, all those guys. I mean, because she would occasionally go on the road with me and see things, and of course she thought I was different. Then she found out I wasn't. And I didn't become different until that moment.
Mhm.
Until I truly put God ahead of everything.
Yeah.
Lord, it's you. Like I want to be sure. Even now, I go, and I've been praying. I said, Lord, if there's something else you want me to do, show me. If there's another way that I can use what you've given me to reach people, show me, and I'll do it. And I think that should be everybody's. But I mean the gift. I mean the fact that my wife's willingness to forgive me and stay was the greatest example of Christ-like love and forgiveness that I've ever experienced.
Okay, so
Brother, I was just a wild man
yeah,
on the road,
yeah.
but I'm not that guy today.
No, praise God. Thank
Yeah,
God. Like I said, it comes across in everything, the way you communicate, you're even just looking at you, you can just see the Holy Spirit filled within you. And obviously you've got a ministry with the Hope of David is your ministry that you were telling me about.
yeah. Heart of David
Heart
is
of David. Heart of David. Sorry.
it's kind of like because God said David is a man after my own heart. So in my prayer, I said, Lord, help me to be like David. I want to be a man after your own heart. And you look at David's life, the fact that God could say David is a man after my own heart. David was an adulterer. David was a murderer. David did all these horrible things. And yet God could still say David is a man after my own heart.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because ultimately God knows who we are better than we know ourselves. And again, even now, I should like I don't look for fame anymore. I said if I get recognition for anything, okay, I want to, but I want to somehow turn it around and use it as a tool to serve God.
Yeah, I agree.
That's
Yeah.
and again, that one scripture, many will come in that day and say, Lord, did we not do miracles in your name?
Mhm.
I never knew you.
Mhm.
Wow.
It's
So
a terrifying
yeah.
thing to contemplate. And for viewers out there, I will say that for me personally, Ted, finding Christ was the greatest accomplishment I could ever have achieved in this life, because to be separated from God for an eternity is not, and also a sense of really discovering who we are. you know
Yeah.
how can any of us know who we truly are if we don't truly know and acknowledge our Father in heaven, our Creator? We can't.
Right.
It's impossible.
Right. Right.
And just being able to share His word is the one of the most important things, if not the most important thing that we could do. Ted, I will ask though, when you came back after that incident in 92 and you've rediscovered your faith and you've recommitted your life to the Lord, were there any of the guys, obviously you were working with Mike Rotunda, IRS, were there any of the guys that gravitated towards your way of thinking that you saw born again? Any of the guys from that time?
Uh, yeah, I mean, because I invited, there's a thing out in Phoenix. There's a pastor out there, Tommy Barnett, Phoenix Assembly of God. And I go, like, well, so everybody asks me, and where do you, Ted, a Baptist? And I said, well, I go to a Baptist church. I said, but I'm at heart non-denominational. I don't care. I said, as long as you believe in Jesus and know He's the only way. Um, what was I saying?
Some of the guys that
Um, okay, like Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors. I mean, when when those guys got saved, I was just thrilled, couldn't believe it. It's like,
Yeah.
and because I remember we would do things. I got him to go out to this thing in Arizona, and that's what got him. And we would go. I remember Larry Carrichek's guy's name. He took us to a prison in Phoenix, and I'm trying to think what it was that Hawk did. Okay, go. He says so they're posing for the inmates, and like one of them, he does a pose. He said, "You think those are big? Yeah, that's not big. Show them, buddy. You think those are big? Yeah, that's not big." And then he keeps going. He says, You know what's big?" And he points to the cross.
Oh,
That's big. And I remember oh my God, that was Hawk, and he was such a good guy,
yeah.
such a good guy.
That's a remarkable that you got to see them come to Christ. I mean, yeah, I didn't know that story about the Road Warriors. Um, was that around that time? Because I think those were you faced the Road Warriors in Wembley Stadium. That was around SummerSlam '90.
Yeah,
So that would have
yeah,
been
yeah.
time. That's God rest their souls, both of them. But yeah, that's good. Anyone else that you recall? I mean, because I know that I think I've heard that Tatanka is also a Christian now.
Yeah, Shawn Michaels,
Yep. Yep.
he got saved. Oh gosh, Lanny Poffo,
Oh, Lanny as well. Okay.
I think. Yeah, Lanny got saved. Again, Joe Hawk Animal. I think my tag team partners, Mike Rotunda, he's saved.
Okay.
I think his boys are saved as well. It's his family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steve Kern.
Oh yeah. Was it Skinner? Steve.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, what you got? Oh, what's his name? Well, Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, Hogan, Reese. Yep, yep.
Oh
Hulk.
yeah, yeah. The Hulk's not through me, but he's saved.
Yep.
And
Also,
then,
the Undertaker too. I heard
yeah,
Rob. Oh,
yeah,
yep, yep. It's it's God's doing some amazing things with the guys of that, who are now, like I said, the guys that grew up watching you at that time. We're now, 30s, 40, early 40s, so it's remarkable what God has done, with that generation of you guys. And like I said, for me, it's just truly inspiring. For me, it's, I see the just the joy that it's given you, the joy that it's given those other men that you talk about, the sense of completion,
yeah.
and putting your life right. It's not about at all, in fact, fast cars and everything else, like they say, fast women and all this. These things are fleeting, and it's kind of like, if you eat a candy, right? Yeah, it tastes good for a few seconds, and then it's gone, right? That's it. And then you're going to regret it later. If you keep eating candies, you're going to gain
Well,
weight.
that's it. Here's a sad thing. I have an older brother. My older brother, Mike. He was my mother's first child from her first marriage.
Mhm.
Mike has a near genius IQ.
Mhm.
He's taught college level mathematics, has a master's degree in psychology. Maybe that's part of his problem. I don't know, but he doesn't believe in God. It's like I think he's maybe to where he'd say, "Yeah, there's some higher power, but it's not. It's whatever that higher power isn't interested in you and me."
Hmm.
which is, and I don't know where he gets that. So there's somebody who I just have to keep in prayer, is my own brother.
Yeah. Okay.
My younger brother, he's a believer. You know, there's three of us, and it was like my mother had Mike from her first husband, and me from her second husband, and then my younger brother John was from Mike Dibiase's, his son.
Mhm. And then your children, all of them, are they all believers?
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When
That's good.
the leader of the household is the one who sets the example. So, it's a blessing. Like I said, well, Ted, stay on the line because I do want to have a quick chat with you after I say goodbye to the viewers.
Okay.
But it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. God bless you, sir. Thank you for coming on and sharing more of your testimony with whoever is meant to hear this will hear it, and hopefully
Yeah.
change and inspire their
God
life.
bless you, my friend, for for what you're doing.
Thank you, Ted.
You know,
Yeah.
just keep going.
Yep. Yep.
Keep going.
Yep. I've had some amazing guests come on. Like I said, some other peers from your time who have acknowledged Christ. When I see the door open, I walk through it and I ask, and I've gotten quite surprised at how many. And then we start talking about faith in Christ, and then the conversation changes. And like I said, the whole antithesis behind creating this show was to show these, you guys that did this, that entertained the world for so many years, but all the things that you acquired, the wealth of knowledge, the wisdom that you have, and then the faith, and to be able to share that with a new audience
Yeah.
is what I'm on the trajectory to doing so. But thank you, Ted. So, Ted, I'll talk to you in a moment here. But thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode of Victoire. I am Emir. This has been the $1 Million Man, Ted Dibiase. And of course, Ted, let's leave it with your signature.
Hey, here's the thing. If you don't remember anything else, always remember this. Everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
And there we go, guys. Until next time, victor what you must victor in your life. God bless you all. Victoire.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Victoire. We ask that you kindly subscribe to the channel, like and share our videos. It helps us spread these messages so much further. Be also sure to check out the Power and Glory podcast, as well as the Stylin' podcast, with WWE superstars respectively Paul Roma and Rico Constantino. Until next time, victor what you must victor in your life. This has been Emir, and Victoire.